The museum of us. The silence in our house wasn't empty. It was dense. It was a curatorial silence, the kind you find in archives where the air is climate-controlled to preserve delicate things. That is what Clara and I had become. Delicate things preserved in the amber of a 15-year history. Our life was enviable by any metric of the suburban bourgeoisie. We lived in a restored Edwardian close to the city, a structure of high ceilings and crown moldings that I had spent years sanding, painting, and perfecting. I am an architect, and I treated our relationship much like I treated the house, as a structural necessity that required maintenance, reinforcing, and the occasional coat of aesthetic gloss to hide the weathering. Clara was the constant. She was the coffee brewing at 6:45 a.m., the smell of roasted beans drifting up the stairs like a summons. She was the neatly folded towels, the soft hum of the dishwasher running at night, the warm weight on the left side of the mattress. We had moved past the turbulent waters of early romance into a vast, flat lake of predictability. There was safety there. God, there was so much safety. It felt like being wrapped in heavy wool, protective, warm, and utterly stifling. I remember sitting in the armchair by the window one November evening, watching her read. The lamp cast a golden pool of light over her hands, hands I knew better than my own. I watched the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest, the way she tucked a stray lock of graying hair behind her ear without looking up. I felt a profound affection for her, deeper than marrow. But alongside it, growing like black mold behind wallpaper, was a terrifying boredom. It was a boredom so physical it made my teeth ache. I wanted her to shout, to break a plate, to set the curtains on fire. Instead, she turned a page, the paper making a dry shuck sound that seemed to echo endlessly in the quiet room. Seku, hairline fractures. The disintegration didn't begin with a shout. It began with the things I stopped saying. In the beginning, I would share the minutiae of my day, the difficult client, the rain on the construction site, the sandwich I ate for lunch. But slowly, I began to hoard these small fragments of my life. I told myself it was because she wouldn't be interested, or that she was too tired from her own work at the gallery. But that was a lie. I withheld them because keeping secrets, even banal ones, gave me a strange sense of autonomy. It created a private room in my mind where I could stand alone. The disconnection manifested in the sensory details of our cohabitation. When we hugged, I began to count the seconds until release. When she spoke about her mother or the leaky faucet, I found myself watching the movement of her lips rather than deciphering the words, observing her like a specimen in a jar. "Are you listening, Elias?" she asked one night over dinner. The clink of her fork against the porcelain was sharp, a punctuation mark in the humid air of the kitchen. "Of course," I lied, the word tasting like copper. "You were talking about the framing for the new exhibit." She looked at me then. It wasn't a suspicious look, which would have been easier to parry. It was a look of mild confusion, as if she were trying to recognize a face in a fog. "I finished talking about that 10 minutes ago," she said, softy. "I was asking if you were happy." "I'm tired, Clara. Just work." I watched her accept this excuse. She nodded, retreating back into the safety of the routine, polishing the surface of the table with her napkin. I saw the disappointment settle in the corners of her mouth, but I didn't reach out to wipe it away. I let the hairline fracture sit there, unsealed, waiting for pressure. 3. the open door. Then came Julianne. It is a cliché, I know, the younger woman, the burst of color in a grayscale world. But infidelity is rarely about the new person. It is about the version of yourself they reflect back to you. I met her at a site consultation. She was a landscape designer, dealing in soil and roots while I dealt in steel and glass. She was chaotic where Clara was ordered. She was loud where our house was quiet. When Julianne looked at me, she didn't see the man who forgot to take out the recycling or the husband who fell asleep during movies. She saw an architect. She saw a man of vision. She asked me questions about my theories on brutalism that Clara hadn't asked in a decade, because Clara already knew the answers. The slide was glacial. It started with coffee that turned into wine. It started with texts that were strictly professional, then professional with an edge of wit, then personal, then confessional. I remember the first time I crossed the line. It wasn't physical. We were standing in the rain under a partially constructed overhang, looking at blueprints. She laughed at something I said, a genuine, throaty laugh that made her throw her head back. I caught a scent of her, damp earth and expensive perfume, and I felt a jolt of adrenaline that I hadn't felt in years. I went home that night and looked at Clara. She was folding laundry on the sofa. The domesticity of it, which once felt like an anchor, now felt like a cage. I looked at her and felt a surge of resentment for her innocence, for the fact that she didn't know I was currently vibrating on a frequency she couldn't hear. I convinced myself I was entitled to this spark. I work hard, I thought. I provide. I have been faithful and good. Do I not deserve to feel alive? The entitlement of the unfaithful is a powerful narcotic. It allows you to view your betrayal as a form of self-care. Ifiki. The mechanics of deceit. The affair itself, when it became physical, was less about the sex and more about the transgressive thrill of the double life. It was the adrenaline of the split screen. My life became a logistical masterpiece. I became an expert in time management and digital hygiene. The phone was always face down on the table, the ringer silenced, the notifications hidden. I developed a mental map of the city, dividing it into safe zones and danger zones, where I might run into friends of Clara's. But the exhaustion was distinct. Lying is a creative endeavor. It requires constant invention and consistency. I had to remember which version of the truth I had told, which late-night meeting I had fabricated. I would come home from seeing Julianne, my skin humming, and walk into the cool, lavender-scented air of our bedroom. Clara would be asleep. The curve of her spine, a familiar mountain range, under the duvet. I would go to the bathroom and scrub myself in the shower, the hot water turning my skin red. I washed away the scent of the other woman, but I couldn't wash away the dissonance. I would slide into bed beside Clara, and the guilt would arrive. It wasn't a sharp pang. It was a heavy, dull pressure in the center of my chest, like a collapsed lung. I would listen to the hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the settling of the floorboards, and I would feel like an intruder in my own life. I was a ghost, haunting the marriage. And yet I didn't stop. I couldn't. I was drinking salt water to quench a thirst. Every time I was with Julianne, the return to the real world became harder. I began to pick fights with Clara, petty squabbles about nothing, just to create distance, to justify my withdrawal. If she was nagging, if she was unreasonable, then I wasn't a villain for seeking comfort elsewhere. I villainized her gentleness to excuse my cruelty. V. The quiet. Devastation. The discovery did not happen with a bang. There were no thrown vases, no screaming matches in the driveway while the neighbors watched from behind curtains. It happened on a Tuesday, in the kitchen, under the harsh glare of the halogen lights. I had been sloppy. Complacency is the eventual downfall of every liar. I had left my email open on the iPad we shared for recipes. A reservation confirmation for a hotel in the city, a staycation I had taken a week prior, ostensibly for a conference that didn't exist. I walked into the kitchen, loosening my tie, ready to perform the role of the tired husband. Clara was standing at the island. The iPad was dark in front of her. She wasn't crying. She was standing perfectly still, her hands resting flat on the granite countertop, as if she were bracing herself against an earthquake that only she could feel. "Elias," she said. The tone of her voice stopped me dead. It was devoid of inflection. It was a dead thing. "Hey," I said, the panic rising in my throat like bile. "What's wrong?" She didn't look at me. She looked at the cabinets I had installed 2 years ago. "I know," she said. 2 words. The architecture of our life, the 15 years of memories, the shared jokes, the griefs, the vacations, the Sunday mornings, all of it collapsed under the weight of those 2 syllables. I opened my mouth to deny it, to spin the web, but the look she finally turned on me silenced the lie. It wasn't anger in her eyes. It was a total, devastating comprehension. It was the look of someone watching their house burn down and realizing they have no water to throw on the flames. "Who is she?" she asked. "Clara, please." "No." She raised a hand, a small, trembling gesture. "Don't tell me. I don't want to know her name. I just want to know if you love her." The silence that followed was the loudest noise I have ever heard. It screamed off the walls. It rattled the windows. "I don't know," I whispered. And that was the truth. That was the most damaging thing I could have said. Clara nodded slowly. She untied her apron and folded it, placing it next to the fruit bowl. "I think you should go to a hotel tonight, Elias." She didn't scream. She didn't throw me out. She simply excused herself from the room, walking past me without touching me, moving with the fragility of someone made of glass. I heard her footsteps go up the stairs, then the soft click of the bedroom door closing. I stood in the kitchen for an hour, listening to the refrigerator hum, realizing that I had taken a sledgehammer to the load-bearing wall of my existence. 6. The Echo. It has been 6 months since I moved out. I live in a modern apartment now, closer to the firm. It has floor-to-ceiling windows and concrete floors. It is sleek, efficient, and cold. Julianne and I lasted 3 weeks after the separation. Without the secrecy, without the thrill of the forbidden, the relationship withered. Exposed to the harsh light of day, we realized we had nothing in common but the deceit we had shared. She was a symptom, not the cure. I went back to the house yesterday to collect the last of my books. Clara wasn't there. She had arranged to be out. The house was exactly as I had left it, yet entirely different. It felt like a museum exhibit of a life that no longer existed. I walked through the rooms, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood. I saw the ghost of us everywhere. The spot on the rug where we used to drink wine, the kitchen island where I broke her heart. The air smelled of her, vanilla and old paper, and it hit me with the force of a physical blow. I realized then that I hadn't just lost a wife. I had lost my witness. I had lost the only person on earth who knew the continuity of my life. I had traded the profound, boring, beautiful safety, of being known for a fleeting moment of being seen. I sat on the bottom step of the staircase. In the hallway, I had painted 3 shades of cream to get the light just right. I listened to the house. It was silent. But it was no longer the comfortable silence of the archive. It was the silence of a tomb. I looked at the front door, the heavy oak slab with the brass handle. I realized I was on the wrong side of it, and no amount of architectural knowledge could help me design a way back in. I had dismantled the foundation, brick by brick, and now I had to live in the rubble. I stood up, picked up my box of books, and walked out. I locked the door behind me, the key turning in the lock with a final definitive click. It was the sound of a chapter ending, not with a fanfare, but with a whisper.